sort of a control deck. One of the few pseudo-control decks, so to speak, that we've been seeing at the top tables. Although, again, he's got a lot of creatures in his deck. He's got 4 copies of Geist Draft. He's got 3 Boros Reckoner, 2 Thundermaw Hellkite, along with 3 Restoration Angels and 3 Snapcaster Mages to buy back on some of his spells, like War Leader's Healer of Flame, Azorius Charm. He also has 4 Boros Charms in his deck and 3 copies of Rouse Zarek. So he's very sort of a tempo-based blue-white deck, splashing red for all that burn.
Sort of shades of Joel Larson's deck from Protour Gatecrash. You see Reid Duke, big Jund advocate, get off to a good start here with a second turn Farseek.
The key card there, right there for Jund. Turn 2 Farseek, very important here. It allows him to get a Huntmaster and Fells into play before even a Geist Draft can drop down. So, very important card there for Reid.
Reid Duke, as many of you probably know, Star City Games premium columnist, Platinum Pro, recent recipient of a Star City Games token, which, if anything, undersells how perfect his hair is.
Yeah, very just just as you say, he casually just brushes through his hair.
Perfect coif of hair.
Ugh. Troy Polamalu is so jealous of Reid Duke. And there it is, Huntmaster of the Fells. Very, very good card against blue-white-red control. Gives him a board presence of 2 creatures, allows him to make sure that Geist Draft could possibly get blocked. Also puts some pressure on the control player. So Peter looks like he's going to have a pillar for the Huntmaster here, which gives him some breathing room. But again, if Reid drops Thragtusk, Peter's going to be on even backpedaling even more here.
And Kessig Wolfrun, of course, if the game goes long for Reid, gives him access to a lot of power with each individual threat.
Yep. So it looks like Reid, does he have a 5th land and a Thragtusk here? So it looks like, yes, Overgrown 2 comes down, Reid takes 2, dropping to 20, and Thragtusk comes down, bringing him back up to 25. So pretty good start for Reid here. The standard Farseek into Huntmaster into Thragtusk, very difficult draw to beat for any deck, let alone a control deck. Or at least a tempo-based deck like Peter's deck.
Though it is worth noting, Peter has access to Turnburn in his list, which is actually a fairly efficient answer to Thragtusk if he can get a sufficient amount of mana.
Yeah, unfortunately for Peter, he was on the draw and he just doesn't have, and he missed his 4th land drop here, so he's really far behind here. And that looks like a bonfire of the dam for Reid there.
I've watched Reid play on camera a lot, and I've never actually seen him bluff a bonfire here. If he's tanking, there's a bonfire there.
He actually, he telegraphs it pretty clearly. I played a match against him at the Open in New Jersey, and he telegraphed it pretty easily, but didn't cast it. It allowed me to play the next few turns accordingly. So, wondering if Peter now realizes that the bonfire is there and plays the next few turns accordingly. Looks like a Ground Seal is going to come down. Primarily there against Junk Reanimator decks, but not bad against Peter's deck as well because he has access to Snapcaster Mage.
Yep.
So Ground Seal comes down, and see if we're going to have an attack here from Reid.
Boros Reckoner doing a pretty solid job of playing defense here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. The worst case scenario for Reid is if he just attacks with the Thragtusk. The Boros Reckoner blocks it, and Peter can redirect 5 damage to the Wolf token, and Reid will be left with just the Beast. So I'm not sure what's left in Reid's hand, but maybe he just wants to try to rebuild his board and pass back.
Yep. I mean, Reid's got a lot of very clean, non-damage oriented removal spells for Boros Reckoner, so it's possible he wants to hang back and wait for, possibly something like Putrefy, possibly something like Tragic Slip, to be able to slog through the Reckoner without having to trigger it so many times.
So Olivia's a pretty good answer to Reckoner. He can ping the Reckoner once. That trigger won't really do much damage for Reid's board, and then he turn it into a vampire and he can steal it later in the game. And Olivia also flies over Boros Reckoner. So, but this does open up the chance for Peter to backdoor into infinite life gain, because he does have Azorius Charm and Boros Charm in his hand. Unfortunately, in his deck, rather. Unfortunately, he only has 3 lands, so he can't cast both spells in one turn.
Yep. For those of you not acquainted with the combo, you can give your Reckoner lifelink with Azorius Charm, make it indestructible with Boros Charm, and then constantly direct the Reckoner trigger back to itself, which gains you life and causes the Reckoner to re-trigger.
Yeah, so basically if you have Azorius Charm and Boros Charm, and Boros Reckoner is dealt damage somehow, you effectively trigger the combo by casting both your charms.
So we're going to see a ping from Olivia to start the turn from Reid.
And does he have another land to actually steal it? So yeah, there's the +1/+1 counter for Olivia from the ping. And it looks like Peter does have obviously if he's stalling on land, he's going to have a solid grip of spells. It looks like he has a turn burn along with possibly a Boros Charm.
Pings again,
and there's another
pings a
ping.
third time.
And it looks like Olivia's just going to ping for 3 there. And we're getting, is this going to be a Boros Charm potentially, or a Searing Spear to take out the Olivia?
Well, Searing Spear doesn't make a ton of sense because he would have probably just played that.
Or he has, I'm sorry, he has a turn and burn, so he can cast the turn side to make Olivia an O2. And I'm not sure, it looks like he redirected some of the Boros Reckoner pings to Olivia.
Right, so turning it into a 0/1 will finish the job here.
And it looks like that's what he's debating here. So let's see what Peter decides to do. It looks like he has a Rouse Zarek in his hand as well. Not the worst situation for Peter. If he can just draw some mana here, he's got enough removal that he can probably deal with at least the threats on board from Reid. Not sure how much gas Reid has left in his hand.
Yeah, of course the bad thing about Peter here, besides missing his land drops, is that the Keswick Wolf run from Reid makes all of Reid's threats so individually impactful.
Definitely, yeah. So
He can't really afford to take random pot shots because the Wolf run can punk him out. Peter rereading Olivia here.
So it looks like we're going to get the turn side where it becomes an 0/1, loses all abilities.
And in conjunction with the Reckoner ping, the redirection.
And it looks like, yeah, it looks like the Olivia was activated 3 times. And in response to the other counter, maybe? Because the counter still will remain on Olivia.
Yeah.
So it depends on what Peter's timing was here.
So, everyone on the main event should be here tomorrow by 8.
Yeah, if he does it in response, I guess.
Yeah, so it looks like, unfortunately, the timing was off there. He wasn't able to kill the Olivia because the +1/+1 counters stay on the 0/1. So
Yeah.
even if it took 3 damage, it still had 3 +1/+1 counters and became effectively an 0/4, so, or 3/4 rather.
Yeah.
So, yep, Reid Duke wins that game after Peter stalls on 3 mana and makes a slight misplay with turn there, but either way, things were looking pretty good from Reid's side of the board.
Yeah, not a lot to be done there. So, to the sideboards here.
So Peter's got pretty interesting sideboard. He's got 3 copies of Rest in Peace, 3 Supreme Verdicts, 3 Skull Cracks, 2 Izzet Staticasters, 2 Detention Spheres, and a Summon of the Legion, and a Curse of the Echoes. So Curse of the Echoes is a card that you typically see against other Sphinx of Revelation decks come in. Assemble the Legion, I can see that card coming in. It's a card that, now that the Jund decks aren't really playing Acidic Slime anymore, they don't really have an answer to Assemble the Legion, so if you're able to create a stable board, that card can be a game breaker sometimes. So Assemble the Legion, definitely a good card. Detention Sphere, I'm not sure I love that card in this matchup, especially because Reid's definitely going to keep in his Abrupt Decays or board into extra ones because of Boros Reckoner. So Detention Sphere might not be an ideal removal spell. Same thing with Izzet Staticaster, not really something you want in this matchup. Skullcrack, against Huntmaster Thragtusk, it might be where you want to be because I think Peter's just going to try to burn his opponent out. So I can see Skullcrack coming in. Rest in Peace probably not coming in. And Supreme Verdict, I don't really like Supreme Verdict in this matchup because Peter actually probably has more creatures than Reid anyway. And Supreme Verdict, you know, you're not really getting much value off casting a Supreme Verdict off of the Thragtusk. So beyond that, I think you probably don't want to bring in Supreme Verdict.
I certainly don't think that you can bring in both Skullcrack and Supreme Verdict. Those are for 2 different paths.
Yeah.
So I think either one individually is okay, depending on how you want to sort of sculpt the game.
Yep.
But certainly both is nonsensical.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, Reid has 2 copies of Duress, fairly nice here. He has and 2 copies of Rorik Thar the Unbound, which is actually fairly awesome against a deck that is so spell heavy. I'm not sure if that's for more dedicated Supreme Verdict, Esper control decks, but certainly Peter's deck, no shortage of spells, so Rorik Thar can be pretty solid here. The rest of his sideboard is I'm a little skeptical of that he wants to bring in here. He has 3 copies of Liliana, which matches up pretty well against Boros Reckoner, but fairly poorly against all the other threats. Whether they're marginal creatures that comes into play effects or simply flash rest in general. There is the threat of Geist Draft, but Reid's deck is very effective at blocking, and I'm not sure if that's a card that Peter would even want to leave in his deck.
Yeah, I still like Geist Draft in this matchup, especially when you're on the play. Like, if Reid doesn't have a Farseek, there's not many things he can do about turn 3 Geist Draft. He can block it with a Huntmaster Fell or a Wolf token, or possibly a Thragtast. The problem is, if he doesn't have a Farseek and he can't get ahead, then none of those plays really matter if Peter's able to attack with his Geist with mana up and cast cards like Azorius Charm or Boros Charm or even Turn and Burn to make the blocker an 0-1. So I think Geist is still very, very relevant in this matchup, particularly with Peter on the play. So I think Reid has to board into the Lilianas just because that's really, if he doesn't have a Farseek, that's his only turn 3 response to a turn 3 Geist from Peter's deck.
Yeah, I mean, he has 2 copies of Vampire Nighthawk, which are a reasonable answer to Geist Trap. But like you said, he has, Peter has a lot of responses to that play.
Yeah, I hate when my play is to just try to block a Geist Trap. I never like being in that position just because Peter's deck is kind of geared towards making sure that doesn't happen.
Sure.
So both players are going to check their opening hand. Looks like Peter is okay with his 7 and Reid Duke staring him down. Looks like he's also happy with his 7, so both players are off to the races. And
rushes back his bangs and
rushes back his it's like a Pantene commercial. So turn 1 Sacred Forgery followed up by a Glacial Fortress. And there we go. We have turn 2 Farseek. Very, very important card. Now it basically means that a Huntmaster of the Fells can come down prior to any of Peter's turn 4 plays like Ral Zarek or Restoration Angel. So very important. Also means that it can follow up a Geist Trap. So Huntmaster's a great follow-up to Geist. The problem is that generally without a Farseek, that doesn't happen. So
and very noteworthy here is that Reid has an Overgrown Tomb and Farseek for another Overgrown Tomb, which is probably a representation of Liliana the Veil.
Yes, definitely. Likely, he could have gotten a Blood Crypt, perhaps, but maybe he has Liliana the Veil
and Garruk Primal Hunter,
and Garruk
possibly.
Primal the Hunter in his hand. So, yeah, definitely suggesting that he has one of those 2 cards, or if not both. And there's the Nighthawk too, another double black card, but not nearly as threatening as the Lilianas in some cases. So here we have a Boros Charm. And it looks like Ral Zarek's going to come down. It can ping that Vampire Nighthawk.
Pretty good response here from Peter. Ral Zarek, great at taking down 3 toughness creatures. And Vampire Nighthawk is actually very threatening for Peter because his deck is much more devoted to more of an aggressive tempo-ish plan, and so lifelink creatures are a bigger deal than a more controlling shell of blue, white, red.
Yeah, even though it's just a 2/3, it's still a very annoying card for Peter that he just has to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So Reid Duke here, let's see. We know he has, we thought there's possibility that he had Garruk in his hand. Let's see if we see a Garruk come down this turn. I would assume if he had, he'd probably just slam it into play, but maybe he's thinking whether or not it's the right play. Looks like Cavernous Souls is going to come down. You'll find out what that's naming. Cavernous Souls comes down, and Thragtusk comes down.
Yeah. I'm curious because that Farseek from Reid implies some things very specific about his hand, so I'm curious to see how this plays out.
So Cavernous Souls named Warrior, actually.
I'm going to imagine that's Rorik Thar related. I don't know for sure if he's a warrior, but I'm going to make an assumption here.
So it looks like Peter just upticked his Ral Zarek, just tapping and untapping a land, tapping a Thragtusk, untapping a land. We're going to see a turn and burn here.
This is fused, so it can make the Thragtusk lose all powers and then kill it. So and actually a pretty efficient answer.
Yeah, not a bad answer. And here comes another Thragtusk, though. So it looks like Peter has some more spells in his hand. Looks like he has a Snapcaster Mage. He's going to untap his Sacred Foundry. Looks like he does have another turn and burn to deal with the other Thragtusk from Reid Duke, but he still just doesn't have any threats.
Yeah. So Reid gaining a lot of life, but Peter kind of keeping pace with the board.
Let's see if Reid can actually deal with that Rouse Eric. And there's looks like a Boros Charm, Azorius Charm. Probably going to get a Azorius Charm here.
Yeah, Boros Charm not great now with Reid at 30. Not a lot to really worry about there.
Unless Reid does have that Garrick, or maybe he wants to, you know, because the Boros Charm is a way to technically deal with Garrick, Primal Hunter.
Yeah.
So let's see what Reid takes here. I'd imagine, all things being equal, he probably takes the Azorius Charm just because it can cantrip and deal with any threat. But let's see what Reid does here.
And that Snapcaster Mage very potent with the turn burn that's in the graveyard. He has effectively another kill spell at the ready.
Yep. So Reid does take the Azorius Charm, leaving Peter with just a Snapcaster and a Boros Charm. And here's a Ground Seal with shuts off that Snapcaster Mage.
Never mind.
And a second Snapcaster Mage. So here we go. We have our Rouse Eric still in play. We might see some coin flips this match.
Yep,
Have
we're getting
yet
close.
to see coin flips.
Now, of course, you can't fuse the turn burn, but Snapcaster can block, and you can make the creature in question a 0/1.
Yes. So, Boros Charm, Snapcaster Mage, and there's yet another Thragtusk. 3 Thragtusk now for Reid Duke. And here we have yet another land from Peter. And it looks like he's just going to uptick that Rouse. Oh, no, he's going to kill the Thragtusk now.
Yeah. And that Boros Charm is really rough in Peter's hand because Reid just gained so much life here.
Yeah. And he can't even Snapcaster it back because the Ground Seal's in there. So let's see. It looks like the Reid does have a Garrick Primal Hunter. So Reid attacks for 3, likely attacks Rouse Eric, and here comes the Snapcaster to try to chump block. And that's exactly what we get.
So we're going to see if Reid is just going to pass.
And Stronghold pumps the Snapcaster Mage to deal with the Beast token.
Yeah.
And we're going to get some trample damage over, it looks like. Or at least that's what Reid's debating.
You know, the thing is, Reid's actually, you know, he's been missing land drops, so his hand is, if it's not land, it's a bunch of spells, and so.
So, yep. Activates it for 1. And there's the Boros Charm giving it indestructibility. So, pretty good turn there for Peter.
Probably actually double strike because he wanted to take it down.
Yeah, double strike. So, interesting. Reid knew about the Boros Charm.
I think he's happy to trade that kind of resource. That's the last card in Peter's hand.
So we're going to untap the Stronghold.
Combo.
Let's see, a Farseek from Reid. So he's still got plenty of gas in his hand. The question is, can he start casting more than 1 spell a turn?
He's probably a little far away from that, but he's got a lot of breathing space too. Remember, he's at 31 from all those Thragtusks. So.
Yeah. Liliana comes down. He's down ticks it, and here comes a Farseek. So gets a Planeswalker into play and develops his board. Rouse Eric can deal with Liliana the Veil currently if he chooses to. However, Peter does have that Slayer Stronghold, so atop that Geist Saint Trap would be pretty good right here.
Yep.
Let's see. We have not seen many creatures from Peter's side of the board. So it looks like we're going to have a Searing Spirit to deal with. Interesting, he decided to Searing Spirit rather than just see if he drew a creature.
Yeah, I think I would have sat probably for a turn because you have Rouse Eric in play as an onboard response. So
yeah, you don't really need to. It doesn't seem like you need to cast Searing Spirit right there, but you have some time. Looks like did he draw a creature? And it is in fact Geist Saint Trap. And here we go. We activate the Slayer Stronghold, giving Geist +2 and haste. So potentially dealing 8 points of damage right here.
Can you Rouse Eric the Slayer Stronghold and go again?
Yeah, he could choose to do that if he wanted to. And again, if he did have that Searing Spear still in his hand, he could have just attacked the Liliana, but decides to just untap the Slayer Stronghold post-combat.
Yeah, and this is just a really tough path for Peter to try to win the game with, just because Reid is at such a high life total.
Yeah, but I don't know. Geist plus Stronghold and Ralzera can actually end the game pretty quickly.
Sure.
So Peter has a lot of really good threats that he can draw off top of his deck because of that Slayer Stronghold. Even a Thunder Mote would be pretty solid in this situation. And there's a Huntmaster there, fellas, which is a decent blocker against Peter's Geist Saint Draft. Because even though Ralzera can deal with the Huntmaster there, fellas, he still be left the Wolf token. So yeah, Peter just drew a land for the turn. Really not much that Peter can do now other than just kill off the... so Slayer Stronghold's going to come over because he's going to get a +4/+4. And yep.
Reid cannot block soon enough.
So Geist, interesting that he would just trade there.
Yeah, it feels like you're compelled to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, because you have so few threats. And with Reid at such high life, you really need that guy to stick around for at least a couple more turns. Maybe you can draw a Boros Charm. Maybe you can draw a War Leader's Helix, Turn and Burn, something to kind of force it through. All you have to do, or you still have the Ralzera in play, so you can even tap down that Wolf token if he doesn't have another threat and untap your Slayer Stronghold. So here comes a Rutheric, which can end things very quickly. Even if Peter does have a spell, Reid now can redirect that 6 damage from Rutheric to the Ralzera now. So pretty good shape for Reid right here.
Good against all number of things. It prevents Peter from really being able to attack any flyers that he draws, and obviously Peter's deck is very spell dense, and so Rorikthar is powerful against that as well.
Yeah, so there you see that Ogre Warrior coming down. One of the reasons that Reid named Cavern on Warrior. And now a Huntmaster joins the board. Now, Peter just doesn't have anything in his deck that can really combat this. Even a top deck Thundermaw Hellkite will basically just get eaten by the Rutheric.
Yeah.
And he can trade with it using the Slayer Stronghold. Either way, the damage is done there. Yeah. So it looks like Rutheric can come around again. And with the Kessig Wolf run, Reid can put a lot of pressure on Peter. Peter has only got a 2/1 to block.
Yeah, I mean we're probably looking at something pretty close to a 2-turn clock that Reid's able to generate here.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to cast any spells this turn, so the Huntmaster will flip.
Yep.
Yeah, and there we have a Restoration Angel from Peter. So what can we draw here?
Rorikthar, oh, okay. The Restoration Angel again prevents the Huntmaster from flipping, but still only lands for Peter, and Rorikthar plus Kessig Wolf run, kind of a combo.
I think it was really the 3 Thragtusk that Reid was able to resolve earlier in the game. Peter just didn't have enough gas to fight through those cards, gaining 15 life and having to expend so many resources just dealing with beast tokens.
Yeah, I think that sort of like tempo and burn plan is really hard to execute against Jund because they have enough spot removal to pick apart their creatures, and then you're left with these Boros Charms and War Leader's Helixes and so on. Really actually hard to convert into like meaningful damage. You have very little pressure to back it up, and the Jund deck's equipped with all manner of life-gain creatures between Thragtusk and Huntmaster the Fells. So
yeah, the only card that Jund can't effectively deal with is Geist the Saint Draft, and even after board, they still have the Liana to be able to deal with it.